This is the Teacher Talking Time podcast.
What experiences or insights both of you had that led to this change in your teaching approach, moving away from this nativeness and more towards intelligibility in the classroom?
The turning point for me, I started to work in a university school of tourism, and I had very little contact time with my students, but their pronunciation wasn't very intelligible because they'd received no pronunciation instruction all the way through secondary. So they were left to get on with it as best they could, and some were really interested in English and therefore realized that the way they would automatically pronounce a word wasn't necessarily the way the word was pronounced. So I arrive in this place and I realize I've got to do some pronunciation work. And you look at the number of contact hours a week and you go, wow, I have so little time that I can spend on pronunciation, but I do need to spend some time because otherwise they're going to go out into the world of tourism and not be intelligible to their tourists.
Right.
And that's bad business. And so I started searching for priorities. I really thought I more or less sorted it out, actually. I did a lot of reading and going to lots of conferences, and I thought, yeah, I've got this one sorted out. And I published on that in a journal run by the Pronunciation Special Interest Group. It was my first publication. And then went to a talk at IATEFL in York and watched this woman, but I couldn't remember her name at the time, but she took apart everything that I'd spent the last 3 years putting together. And I go, what?
Oh.
This is crazy. Who is this woman? Never heard of her before. I mean, she comes in here, she comes to our Pronunciation Special Interest Group Day, and she just tears apart everything. And I'm looking at good colleagues, and I can see they're getting upset about what she's saying. And of course, this woman was Jennifer Jenkins. And I set about the business. At first, I refused to read her articles because I thought, who is she anyway? Not even a member of the PronSig. And then I thought, if you're going to actually put this person in their place, you better start reading what they're saying. And the more I read it, the more sense it made. And the more I realized that she was right. And it was she, with her work on the phonology of English as an international language, that made me sit and think, she's absolutely right. We've been chasing around, trying to sound like people from Oxford or from Buckingham Palace. We've been failing miserably. We've been putting our students off more attempts at pronunciation because all of their attempts fail. We've been putting lots of teachers off teaching pronunciation, as Gemma's just referred to, because what comes out of their mouths is not at all like what comes off the cassette, as we used in those days. And I go, you need to rethink everything. You need to actually take on board that your students, some might want to sound like native speakers, but most simply don't have the time. And in the world of tourism, Robin, if you're Spanish and you speak English and sound Spanish, that might be a benefit. Mm-hmm. If you walk into an Italian restaurant and all of the wait and the staff that come to the tables speak to you in Oxford English accents in the kitchen making the food, and whether it's authentic food you're going to get.
Right.
That accents have a value, and in the world of tourism, they have a huge value. And so, Robin, throw away what you've done and start picking up on where this woman, Jennifer Jenkins, has pointed in the direction that she's pointed at, and start picking up on the business of what really matters when you're teaching pronunciation in order that your students can become intelligible, even though we know they won't sound like native speakers at the end of the process. This was the big turning point for me anyway.
There's a lot of, go ahead, Gemma, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say that Jennifer Jenkins was really the turning point for me as well, the lingua franca core. Not that I was ever teaching to a native-like goal, not consciously. I was probably overcorrecting on items that really didn't matter so much for an intelligibility perspective. But when I started to discover Jennifer Jenkins, it was just literally like a light from the heavens descended. Suddenly I was like, this makes so much sense. Yeah, she's responsible for a lot of awakening moments, I think, with regards
Mm.
to intelligibility and that kind of perspective.
What's interesting is a lot of language teachers I would say, in certain parts of the world are still not familiar with the work of Jennifer Jenkins. A lot of them are still pursuing this nativeness like pronunciation. And you both said something interesting, this centrality of intelligibility in pronunciation teaching. And based on my interpretation of what you said, Robin Gemma, is that this should be the priority. So could you perhaps tell us a little bit more about why you believe intelligibility should be prioritized over other aspects of pronunciation?
Because it's the thing that allows pronunciation to do its job.
Mm.
I mean, the pronunciation is it's a background system, but what it's doing is allowing you to be understood by your interlocutors when you open your mouth with whatever accent you might speak English with. I mean, what's really interesting is once you start looking at intelligibility, certain other things come up. And one of the things that comes up regularly is that native speakers, even with what would be considered standard and correct accents, prestige accents from their respective countries, native speakers frequently are not intelligible.
Mm.
And there are many instances, okay, mostly at anecdotal levels, because people just don't go out and sit and do the research to get beyond anecdotal. But there are many, many instances of meetings where the people in the meeting are from international companies. This is all over Europe. It's happening all of the time. And then a native speaker joins the meeting and is not understood by everybody else. That the native speaker is the thorn in your side. Why is intelligibility important? Because it is the basic function. It's the one that allows communication to go on.